Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to my channel or channel, your channel, everybody's channel. As long as you are a woman, and if men can benefit from our channel, we welcome them as well. Welcome to Women Healing Together, a channel where it's all about women, what we experience, how we grow, how we mature, how we heal. Everything woman is here at Women Healing Together. And specifically, welcome to the live show, Talk Truth, that is aired through this channel, Women Healing Together. And Talk Truth is your safe space and your safe place where we tackle the issue of childhood sexual abuse and help women who are on their road of healing and recovery. And hasn't season two been fantastic? So many victories won, so much growth happening all over the world as women reach out. And we just want to thank you so much for being a part of the Women Healing Together family, the WHT family, and the Talk Truth family, brought to you by Women Healing Together, of course, and the LAX Society. We are at episode 7. 7. We are heading there. And for those of you who are new to the channel, we are reminding you, if you like what is happening here, we are a movement, we are a family where we are on the mission of helping women to heal. So if this is your first time, welcome, and please subscribe and hit the notification bell. I know that many persons are subscribing, but you're not hitting the notification bell, so you don't know when we upload a new video or when Talk Truth goes live. So we encourage you to do that. We also encourage you to share. Share. I always say we're not selfish here at Talk Truth. So we definitely want you to share with others. Put it on your WhatsApp status, send a text message, send an email, share it on your IG feed, your Facebook page, and just allow the word to go out, because we are on a mission here at Women Heal Together. Thank you. And I'm POPSANN Francis, for those of you who are new. And for those of you who are coming back, you are already a member of Women Healing Together. You are already excited about Talk Truth and the nuggets and the expertise that are shared here. We are always happy to have you. Reminding you that this is an interactive program. You have experts at your fingertips, experts who are willing. They have made themselves available from their very busy schedules. They have had years of experience in everything trauma and healing and just being your best selves. So you have them, right? Ask them the questions, interact in the chat, and allow us to have just a beautiful community where you can get the help that you need, where we all can continue our journey of healing. On this episode of Talk Truth, we are addressing the topic healing your brain. And your is there because it's our responsibility. And even additionally, why am I going all over the place? Am I nervous? I'm not nervous. I don't know what's happening, but let me regulate myself. So the word your is there because I want every single sister to understand that it is something personal, that yes, healing is possible, but not just for everybody out there. It is possible for you. And I'm very excited about this episode as I introduce and present to you Dr. Courtney Dookie. He is a speaker and he's coming on. Welcome, Dr. Dookie.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So happy to have you. And you're making history because you're the first male guest on Talk Truth. So you're in a woman's world. And it's critical because we need the men in our lives, our husbands, our fathers, our uncles, our friends, to help us heal from the trauma. So thank you so much for accepting to be a part
My
of the
pleasure.
family. All right. So a little bit about Dr. Dookie. He is a speaker, he's a coach, he is a mind expert, and that fascinates me because we're just going to be delving in this evening. He is a mentor, he's also a clinical psychologist, and he is also an associate faculty at the City University in Calgary, that's in Alberta, Canada. And we're so happy, so happy to have Dr. Dookie with us. And we're going to be sharing some of the awesome resources that he has put time and effort into with a heart of service because he wants the help. So please stay tuned for those. We have one, Dr. Dookie, we have one request of everybody. One request. Apart from interacting in the chat and making use of your availability and your expertise, we have one task or one request. Get pen or pencil
Yes.
and get paper, right? Get paper and be ready to take notes because you are about to transform your mind by the help of God and the expertise of Dr. Dookie. Do you have anything to say, Sir Dookie, before we delve into it? Want to
I'm
greet
really
the
excited,
family?
and actually, I'm really excited to be the break in history, to be the first male on your program. I'm excited to share, and hopefully that those who will be listening, they will be blessed. And I like what you said. It might be a trigger for healing and
Yeah.
moving through and having that the resources or at least an introduction to the possibility that we don't need to remain where we are, but there is healing available.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And one of our ladies, she's already here, a part of the family, Mrs. JB Redwood, is saying to you, good night. All right. All right. So we are going to dig into it. We're going to dig into it. And just a reminder, some persons may be saying, but wait, Dookie, that name sounds familiar. In fact, his wife, Sanya, was here with us on episode 5, where she spoke about how the brain is affected by trauma. So if you're looking at it, Dr. Dookie Courtney coming now is really getting us into the practicality of it. How can we heal? So this is basically part 2 of the brain healing journey. Dr. Dookie, when we talk about the brain and trauma, can you just give us a synopsis, an overview, just a refresher from what Sanya came on and spoke about? How does trauma affect the brain?
First, we need to understand a few things. The way how the brain itself is developed. We have basically, we can divide the brain into 3 sections. We have the brain stem, which is responsible for automatic functions, breathing, respiration. We have the middle brain, or the limbic system, which regulates emotions. Everything emotional takes place there. And then we have the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking, logical stuff, the way how we do cognition. And when you think of trauma, trauma impact all 3 areas of the brain. Fundamental, one of the things we know is that when a person, a woman, since we're talking specifically about women experiencing sexual trauma, whenever an individual goes through trauma, the frontal lobe goes into a shutdown mode. What that means, you think of your frontal lobe and you think of the fact that it's almost in captivity. It's frozen state. So that person who have experienced the trauma, their frontal lobe doesn't function in its optimum state. The limbic system, in which we have the amygdala, becomes oversensitive. So that individual experience things like depression and extreme anxiety, symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's because of oversensitivity of the amygdala. You also have the hippocampus, which is also damaged, or we'll probably say there's a limited amount of synaptic connection. What that means, we have all these neurons in our brain. So imagine that the average human brain has probably about 100 billion neurons.
Mhm.
Each of those neurons have at least 10,000 connections. And so there is about 1,000 trillion connections in the human brain. In the hippocampus, where memory is regulated, or memory is consolidated via the hippocampus, there's a limited amount of neuronal connection in that part of the brain. And that's the reason for a lot of women who are individuals who gone through trauma or experienced trauma. Sometimes they have problem with memory and learning. And so there is an emotional part of it. There is this cognitive part of it about learning and memory. And there is the frontal lobe, which is shut down. So you think about it like that, going even as far as to the brainstem, which is automatic function. The brainstem also is impacted. And think about it like this. When we're born in the world, we are born with a fully developed brainstem. And that brainstem, you think of a baby, when the baby is crying, what a mom will do, they will take that baby and they'll rock the baby. And that rhythm, and we'll talk more about this, that rhythm help the baby to soothe. And imagine a child going through a trauma where even the brainstem become dysregulated, and they are in a position now where they find it difficult to regulate themselves, because that part of the brain is also impacted by the trauma.
Wow.
That's a synopsis of the three major areas that we can divide the brain in.
So basically, not basically, you are saying every single part of the brain is affected.
Yes, the brain, even though we can break the brain down into these different parts, and we can say, okay, this part function this way, this part function this way. In its totality, the brain is an integrated system. We have a part of the brain called the corpus callosum. It's the highway between the left and the right side of the brain. So information travel from the left to the right and the right to the left, that cross connection. When a person goes through trauma, that part of the brain, the corpus callosum, is also impacted. Therefore, information going across left and right will also be impacted. The thalamus is also impacted. And the thalamus, think of the main hub of the brain. Everything travels through the thalamus except olfactory. So think about, apart from the sense of smell, everything else goes through the thalamus. And trauma also impacts the thalamus in significant ways.
I'm telling you, I think there's so many, because of the silence and the shame about sexual trauma and sexual abuse, and because so many persons, so many women are struggling in silence, we tend not to be knowledgeable about how this is affecting us. And I think a lot of persons believe, oh, it's just bodily, and you get over it. You bathe, you take a shower, you grow up, you're now a woman, you should forget about it. But it's affecting the brain, and the brain affects every single thing else. So it's safe to draw, would it be a safe conclusion then, a safe deduction to say, Dr. Dookie, that if we are able to heal the brain, then so many other aspects of our lives will be better?
I would say the brain, but more than that. One of my favorite guy in terms of trauma is Dr. Van der Kolk, and he done tons of research in this area. And I view it, even though we're talking about the impact of trauma on the brain, trauma impacts the entire body. The body, his book entitled "The Body Keeps the Score."
Sure, yes.
And as you go through that, so things, sensory stimuli of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, all of those experiences will have impact, have been impacted because of a trauma. So when you smell something, it sends a signal to the brain, but the body itself reacts in this kind of a tightness, and the body almost goes into a shutdown mode. And it's almost, think of a system in which it needs oil. It's tight. It needs to free up. That's the state the body goes in whenever there's a scent, a sight, a smell, a feeling, a touch, or something. Even though those things are connected to the brain, it has its own impact on the entire body. So we're not just talking about brain. There's a direct connection between brain and body when it comes to trauma.
And then based on that, I think we need to have, not think, but in season 3 we definitely have to bring you back, because we have to talk about how the body keeps the score. That, I think, that is very, very critical for us as women to understand. Thank you so much for giving us just an overview of how the brain is affected by trauma. Is it possible, to heal the brain? Is it possible? Like, I know you did all the studies and you learned all this theory, but some woman out there, some sister out there is skeptical. Like, are you going to go in and do a brain surgery? Is it possible?
Yes, the short answer is yes, it is possible. We serve a powerful God,
That's my next question. How is it possible? So go right into it.
who by design, the brain has a two principles or two things that can happen in the brain. One is called neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change by experience. And the other one is neurogenesis, the ability of the brain to generate new neurons to create new pathways. So when we think of neuroplasticity, maybe a person who have experienced trauma, the brain is damaged, or maybe there are a limited amount of neuronal connections. Maybe the brain is shut down in some ways. By practicing, by doing certain practice, by being engaged in certain activities, it can significantly change and rewire the brain. So for someone who is listening, someone who's viewing this tonight or viewing the rebroadcast, yes, there is hope. It can change the human brain. When we look at the human brain under fMRI studies, you can see significant changes can take place. And that's the beauty. To answer your question, yes, it does not matter what you have been through, what you are going through. Our brain has the ability to change with the right environment, the right things to practice. All of those things can come together to cause significant changes in the brain.
Oh, I'm telling you, when you talk about God being creator, it's absolutely amazing, because sometimes when you're talking to women and you say healing is possible, it sounds like up in the air. Am I
Yes.
going to do some zum type of thing, what's that? It's not, but it's not possible. It sounds good. Yes, I can heal, but what are the practical steps that I can take? And while I'm using my layman understanding, so feel
All
free to
right.
correct me if I'm wrong. As you talk about how the brain changes, my mind goes to my hair, and you cut it and you think, oh, that's it's damaged, but it grows back.
Of course.
Is that a similar concept in the brain, where you're saying God has created us so wonderfully that even if trauma affects us, that the brain can literally grow back and cause healing?
It can change. So one of my favorite Bible verse is, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. And the premise of that passage, at least from a science perspective, is that when we come in contact with God,
Mhm.
changes can take place. And you said, what are some practical things you can do to make this change happen? If you recall, I said that trauma impact the brainstem, that regulation. And imagine the brainstem controls the way the heart beats. It controls our sleep. It controls all those automatic functions of the body. And think of the fact that trauma impact that. When this is going to sound so simple, but it's so profound when you think about changing the brain. When you think about music, music is one of the most powerful regulators that we human beings have access to. Christian songs or uplifting music. Music tend to regulate the brainstem. So when we sing, like when I work with people from a Christian perspective, and I give them this program to follow, one of the key things I'll say to them, you need to have at least a few songs. I
Yes.
can't sing, and I always confess to that everywhere I go.
Yes.
But when we sing, there is something that goes on in our bodies. And as much as that sounds so simple, music regulate the brainstem.
Mm-hmm.
Rhythm regulate the brainstem. When the brainstem is regulated, one part of the brain being regulated will have changes in all parts of the brain. So what do I mean by that? If I am regulating myself through the way I move my body through dance and music, that is now going to impact the way how my limbic system regulates itself. And through music and body movement, I can start now to unleash or unshackle my prefrontal cortex to function better. So I start to think clearer. The opportunity, the brain is open up now because of this rhythm and body movement, and the door is now open for us to engage with the traumatic experience, engage in making sense of the traumatic experience. So in other words, what I'm saying, POPSANN, is this: through music, body movement, that's where you ask the practical steps.
We're going to dig
That's
into
where it
them.
starts.
Yes.
And once we can start there, there is a thing like this. I work with a lot of people, and one of the main treatment modalities out there for treating almost any disorder, psychological disorders, I should say, is cognitive behavioral therapy. And as powerful as cognitive behavioral therapy is, it has to come second in line to things like music, dance, in terms of the healing of trauma. Because cognitive behavioral therapy is premised on the idea that I need to be able to think through my trauma and bring my thinking brain online. But if my thinking brain is offline and I'm going to a trauma treatment that is trying to engage my thinking brain, it will not work. So
Mm-hmm.
before I can engage a thinking brain to make sense of the trauma, I need to start at the base of the brain and work my way up. And that's where things like music and dance and body movement comes into play.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doc. Before we go on to the other practical ways that we can heal the brain, what are some manifestations? What are some things that women can look for to know that, yes, something is happening and I'm being affected? I'm being affected and I need help. I know you spoke about like insomnia and depression and anxiety, but what are some others? Because sometimes you see we have the result of the trauma and persons don't even know that it's connected.
Trauma.
So let's talk about that to help
But
women just get clarity.
you mentioned some of them. So areas is when if it can impact us in terms of intimacy. The way in an intimate relationship, women can experience that in negative ways because it's their bodies and their bodies are going through this. So that's one way. If you're married and you in terms of intimacy and you're experiencing certain things like, why am I feeling this way? I should be enjoying this. Why do I feel this way? It could be a contribution from the trauma. You're feeling sad and you're feeling down and depressed, and you're asking yourself, why am I experiencing these feelings? And there is currently nothing going on in my life to say trigger these experiences or these emotions I am experiencing. That could be a manifestation of the trauma, because what we've seen, this is called developmental trauma. And what developmental trauma is I've experienced a traumatic event in my early life, and now it's been manifest itself in psychological symptoms of depression, anxiety, the way I experience intimacy, my thinking patterns. The way how I think about things is significantly impacted based on the experience I have had in terms of the trauma. Physical pain, because the body keeps a score and there's this tension in the body, and that can lead to physical pain. Sometimes we experience this tightness in the neck, in the shoulder, in the back. One of the areas we say in the brain, or the brain body connection, that's impacted because of trauma is an area we call the vagus nerve, one of the 12 cranial nerves. And the vagus nerve carry information between the brain and comes on the body in this area, back of the neck here. And whenever, sometimes that gets stiff, it gets really rigid because of the traumatic experience. And that will equal things like constant headaches, back pain, shoulder pain, facial pain. All of those kind of experiences can come when the vagus nerve needs to be regulated, but it's almost in a stiff, a rigid, contracted mode. And all of those are impact can be results of a traumatic experience.
It's like every single time an expert comes and talk truth, we are brought to the very clear realization that sexual abuse, any form of abuse really, but because we specifically address sexual abuse and talk truth, it is no joke. It can literally be life and death. And even if it's not literally life and death, there are so many women who are walking around but dead emotionally, dead socially, it's crazy. And as you're talking, I'm serious, you know how expressive I am, right? But I'm thinking as you're talking, Dr. Dookie, and I'm looking at my own life. And I'll freely share because I know not everybody is at the stage that they can freely share. So I put myself out there in the hope that women will get the voice. So I have someone to ask the questions that they may not be comfortable asking. Sometimes you talk about developmental trauma, and I've always wondered, why is it that when I was a teenager, right? I'm getting a little counseling, everybody. Why is it that when I was a teenager, I would immerse myself, especially in the creative art forms? Anything? Go ahead.
Sometimes we find ways, human beings are very creative, right? And we find ways to deal with what we have experienced. If you get involved in the creative arts, that's a healthy way to start to deal with that. Other people get into things like alcohol and promiscuity, and so but we are all seeking for a way to manage what is inside. And sometimes what is inside is almost that pain, that we call it the insular experience, a part of the brain that deals with disgust and those gut feelings. And sometimes when we experience those things, we find different ways to cope with them. Some people find healthy ways, like the arts or music or different things that they can do to enhance their lives. Some, it's more on the negative side of pain and the shame and the guilt and the suffering. And the common one I face oftentimes, it is my fault. I should have done something. It shouldn't have happened to me. And if I'd done this differently, and just for any women who are listening today, it's not your fault. Nothing about being sexually abused can be your fault. It doesn't matter what excuse you give yourself, doesn't matter what you've heard from anyone else. There is not a hint of the experience that you're responsible for.
That's a tough truth, yeah. Nugget right there. Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you so much for saying. Sometimes when we say it to each other as women, you're like, yeah. But when you hear a man, because in so many of our experiences, men are the perpetrators, the fathers, the uncles, the family friend. So when you know and you hear a man say it's validating as well. Yep. No. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh no.
Oh, okay, great. And another point before we get into the practical ways now, because we want you ladies And evil gentlemen who are watching, whether live or in the broadcast, rebroadcast, please get your pens and your papers if you didn't get them. Reminding you also that we want you to ask your questions. You have the mind expert himself here, Dr. Courtney Dookie. He has had years of experience in dealing with trauma. Ask the questions. Ask the question. Give your comment because this is for you. Doc, let's get into some practical ways now to heal the
The brain.
brain.
So we talked about music before and body movement, music or dance. Those are practical things we can start to do. I also encourage
Sorry,
people.
Doc, I'm sorry, is there any specific type of music? Are there some music that may be harmful versus others who that you will find that will be better suited?
I normally I speak from a Christian tradition, right?
Yeah.
So I normally say to people, nice, soothing gospel music, nothing too heavy, just something that's going to regulate the body. And more so even than music is a dance, moving the body. Learn a dance. If you want a practical way to start, go learn a dance technique.
Pastor,
Um,
why you get into trouble with some of these church brethren, down?
even the church, well, you think about the Bible, there's tons of dancing in the Bible, right? So there's Miriam. If you go through your Bible, there's a lot of dancing. I'm not
Yes,
talking
let's
about
tell
any
them.
negative thing.
Yes.
It's God blessed us with this body, and it wasn't designed to be a robotic kind of a system. It's designed to be flexible. That's why we can flex muscle, we can do things. And the movement of the body will have a tremendous impact in starting the healing process. Another thing I recommend to people is, again, these are simple things, but we see how they can change the structure and function of the brain, is worship.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can worship help? Yes, worship can help because worship starts by my view of God. How do I view God? Can I see God as a loving, kind, compassionate, genuine person who loves and cares for me? If I need to blame God for something, I can blame him too. He's big enough and is God enough and fatherly enough to take on my blames that I can throw at him. But how do we build that relationship with God? Starts by the view we take of God. If we have, by starting with a loving, kind, compassionate, genuine, forgiving God, that perspective alone will start to bring certain changes in terms of psychological functioning.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes I go through with people and I said, look, there is a simple formula, and it is so simple that many people do it, but do it consistently and persistently. So we start off developing a worship system in which we start a prayer in the morning. Now, that's what I tell people to get their pens. Start a
Yes.
simple prayer. We sing 2 or 3 songs to regulate the system, get the system flowing. Then we, from singing those songs, we find a passage of meditation. Does not have to be a strong theological thing. This is not a theological debate or a theological accuracy. Even those are important. This is healing we're talking about. So we
Yes.
need a passage that speak to the soul, that speak to our lives. And when we get that passage, we read the passage. Then we meditate, and this is where meditation comes into play. We spend some time going over the passage in our own minds. What does this passage mean to me? How can I apply it to my life? What does it say? How does it speak to me? How is it affecting my feelings, my thinking? How are these experiences that I'm going through with this passage? And we almost put that passage in memory.
Yes.
Remember, this is not memorization. So the effort is not to force to remember the passage, it's to read the passage to find out what does it mean to our lives. Once we finish that, then we end with sort of a prayer. And in my book, I talk about this in much more length. But we end with a prayer. throughout the day, whatever Bible verse we chose for this meditation, we keep that Bible verse in mind throughout the day. So by about midday, I am reflecting in a similar way on the same Bible verse. And then between midday to the end of the day, I'm spending some more time meditating on the same verse. So throughout the day, I've chosen a passage to ascend my mind to that passage. And this is the beauty about this, POPSANN.
Yes.
Whenever I meditate on the Word of God, and what that means is that I move my mind into the very presence of God. Whenever that happened, the movement of the mind to the presence of God, it has a interesting impact on what we call the parietal lobe. And what happens there is that the more I move my mind to the presence of God, the activity in the parietal lobe goes down, while the activity in the frontal lobe goes up. What's the point of that? When activity in the parietal lobe goes down, it means that the gap between myself and the one I am ascending myself to is closing. In other words, my brain is indicating that I am becoming one with God. And the brain is showing a literal connection. You can see as we meditate and we focus on the object before God, Christ, in our meditation, we're seeing that the parietal lobe starts to become less active. But the beauty about that now, when the parietal lobe becomes less active because of my ascension or my moving my mind in the presence of God, the frontal lobe, which is deactivated by trauma, starts to become activated. In other words, as I get closer to God in prayer and meditation, my frontal lobe starts to become more active. And if my frontal lobe becomes more active, then I can process my experience with words, with ways that's going to be healthy and brings about healing. And this is just one simple kind of a brain spirit connection that is going on when we spend quality time meditating on the Word of God, in the presence of God, and throughout the day, we're seeing literally the brain start to shift. The more we do this, we start to initiate the process of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change.
Wow. Look here. This is what you get on Talk Truth. Meditation and science are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they're much more related. In fact, they seem to be one
They
because of how we were created by God. This is a Talk Truth treasure. Sometimes we take the simplest things for granted. We are thinking that, all right, we need to travel to, in Jamaica, we say, whoa, you will go on far pilgrim lands in order to get healing. We need to read 1 million books to get healing. And Dr. Dookie is here giving us practical steps. Who would have thought, ladies, tell the truth? Who would have thought that when you're in your house dancing and singing, that you are actually helping the brain to heal? And we had no idea, no idea. And what do you say? Because there are some parents, I'm thinking about that little girl who is struggling and she may have not told anyone yet, but the mom realized, because I was very like for me, I was more reading in the corner, teaching the trees. But then as I started to realize what is happening and what has happened, and I'm becoming really troubled now, I delve into the creative arts. There are some parents who are listening, Dr. Dookie, who may say, no, don't dance. Why are you singing so loudly? Da, 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 da. What can you say to those parents?
There is a principle
Or
that
to anybody at all?
yeah, there is a principle we use a lot in parenting, especially I know Sanya does a lot of this when she teach parenting course. And it is a principle of connecting to redirect. One of the fundamental things that parents can do is to connect with their child or children. Connecting means that we can observe the daughters, the girl who have gone through this experience, and we can see certain things going on with them. We can see certain shift because of this experience. And connecting with them is creating an environment of trust.
Mm-hmm.
Our daughters, our sons in some ways, but for
Yes.
this program, our daughters need to be able to know this one fact. They can say anything and their parents will believe them first.
Yes.
Can say anything and our parents will believe it first. If they know that if they say something, we're going to believe it and investigate it, it's easy for them to tell us. But if they think that they're not going to believe me, because a lot of girls who experience sexual trauma, this is a big thing. They will say to me, I don't say anything. I choose not to say anything because of two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
My parents would not believe me because of the person who did the act. Because remember, 80% of sexual trauma or any kind of a trauma within a home is the perpetrator is a close family member.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you say uncle did this or grandpa did this or dad did this or whatever the case might be? The child thinks that they will believe the adult over the child. Therefore, for mothers and fathers who are building this relationship, our children should know that doesn't matter what happened, we will believe. So that's the part one. Part two is what we mentioned before. Children, they're so precious and protective
Yes.
that in a weird way, they're going to say it's their fault because maybe they don't want to disrupt the peace around the home. They don't want to cause a conflict or don't want to cause a fight between any in the family. So they will keep this inside of themselves and bury it deep and go through all the pain because one, it's my fault. No one will believe me, and I don't want to disrupt the system.
Yeah.
And those are three of the things that many individuals I've worked with reasons they tend to come up with as to why. So when it comes to parents, connect with your children. When we connect with them, we can better redirect them in the direction we need them to go. But we can't direct them in a direction unless we learn to connect with them. And going back to what we're talking about today, healing the brain.
Yes.
Worship is a way to connect. Worship is a way, when we worship with our kids, there is what we call a unison. There is a connection. There is almost a vibration that happens when people get together to worship. So in homes, it is critical that you have this worship going in the home because it can trigger things. It can help a child to start that whole process if this is going on in their home. Again, it becomes even more difficult if the child is still in the environment.
Yes.
And this is where we want the child to be able to go to mom or go to dad or go to an uncle, go to someone they can trust to express this and know that they will be believed for what they're going through. Because it doesn't matter how much worship is going on in the environment. If the action, the perpetrator, if there's an active trauma, the brain is shut down. It doesn't matter how much you worship, doesn't matter how much you sing, it's not going to go too far because the person is still in the active phase of the trauma.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much for sharing these nuggets with us. As we are about to end our time here together on Talk Truth, is there any last thing that you'd like to add? I know we spoke about music, we spoke about dance, we spoke about worship and biblical meditation. Is there anything else you'd like to?
There's another one that we found to be useful in terms of changing the brain is find ways to give back. In the book, we call this loving, compassionate meditation. And what this is, as you go through the Bible or your own meditation, you think of someone or some other people out there that you want to reach out and touch their lives. By virtue of reaching out to others, we have seen tremendous transformation takes place in the brain. One, reaching out to others will regulate the spill off. At least when I say spill off, I'm referring to like the depression, the anxiety, some of those areas. We can start to regulate those by reaching out to others. But not only that, when we attempt to connect with others, we have mirror neurons becoming very active, that empathy. And so in other words, I am being empathetic to someone else, and that's changing me, because probably one of the things I struggle with is how to have empathy with myself when I feel so disgusting, I feel so messed up, I feel such deep shame. But in this meditation where I am loving compassionate meditation, where I'm trying to reach out to someone else, that's going to start another whole process in the brain that can start a healing of the brain from trauma, psychological trauma. Also, not only do we talk about awareness and being in the present moment. No, Jesus never minced words. Jesus never just throw words out there for us to leave them. When the Bible says things that by beholding him, you become changed. Those are not just words. Those are power to change life. Spending time beholding Jesus. But a part I want to get at is when Jesus talk about the sparrows don't think about tomorrow, the birds don't think, the lily don't think about tomorrow, they bloom today. What that teaches us is our ability to live in the present moment. And by living in the present moment, in that sense of awareness, again, this is going to do miracle for the brain. Because a few things trauma likes to do. It likes to take us back, so it triggers depression. It likes to push us forward, so it triggers anxiety. But life is lived in the now. I'm not saying we may not need to go back and process it if that's needed, because sometimes that's not even needed. We just need to figure out how do we regulate the self and change the brain in the present moment. So what
Are,
I'm getting at
are
is,
you serious, Doc?
uh,
Repeat that, please. Repeat that. Wow.
oftentimes we have this thing that I need to go back and rehash and dig up the past and go through the trauma. Maybe there's a place for that. But in essence, sometimes we don't even need to do that. Because remember, the trauma is impacting us in this moment. We're experiencing life in this moment. Again, don't get me wrong. There are times we need to do that,
Right.
but it's not a need that we have. Context determines it. The person, each individual determines this. And if you were, I recommend people to find a Christian therapist that you can work with to process some of these things. Start a journal. Writing can be a way to even regulate the brain, because you're bringing things out. When you write, you are digging into your temporal lobe. That's where the hippocampus, between the amygdala, your hippocampus and your temporal lobe, that's where those memory transfer up. So when we start to write our experiences, we are making sense of the experiences. And we write through, one of the things I recommend to people is almost write a spiritual reflection. What do I mean by a spiritual reflection? You're writing your life story almost through a spiritual experience. You're reflecting deeply on it. You're bringing in Bible verses. You're bringing in different aspects of your own spiritual journey. And you're doing a spiritual reflection based on your experience. And this is going to start the process of integration. It's going to start a process of making sense of some of the memory that probably doesn't even make sense. And one thing I should say, it doesn't make sense of the experience you went through. What you're trying to give your brain to make sense of it from a neurological standpoint, from an integration standpoint. And that's where writing sometimes can be of benefit. So things like writing, loving, compassionate meditation, intense praying and meditation, music, dance, reaching out to others. These are all things we can start to do that has the potential to start the healing process from both from starting from the brainstem, going all the way up to the prefrontal cortex.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so very much for
You're
sharing this
welcome.
with us. It has been, you have left so many talk truth nuggets. I don't know if you realize it on screen, but our studio engineer is like, when you say something that resonates with him, he's like, talk truth nugget. I have to put this talk truth nugget. Those are the really major points that really connect. And we want to thank you so very much for sharing with us. As you speak about journaling, in fact, there is a guest who came on and she has this journaling initiative from a Christian perspective, but not only from a Christian perspective, where she's also helping others. So again, feel free to reach out there at coco_kale on IG. Dr. Dookie, thank you again
You're
for
welcome.
these practical tips to heal the brain. Amazing, amazing, amazing. I know that I'm thinking about others who you may be here, and we won't have, unfortunately, we won't have Dr. Dookie here every time we have Talk Truth because we have other guests coming. But if you want not to be not if you want to have his expertise all the time everywhere you go, guess what, you can have it. And I'm not saying you have to move to Alberta to get it. You can have it in various ways, and there are at least four ways, at least there are others, but four ways that you can have this mind expert pouring into you every single day of your life for as long as you want. And they are through his books. And he has four of them, and I'm going to mention them to you. Doc, if you have them next to you, please feel free to just put them up on camera for us to see them. The first one that I'm mentioning is neuroplasticity, healing the brain from psychological disorder through
This is
biblical meditation.
this is probably the only one I have here, but that's the one.
That's the one. All right, very good. So thank you so much, Doc. Others, we have Christian contemplative meditation practice. And this talks about how biblical contemplation practice facilitates neuroplasticity in adults, women, you and I, you and I, in adults who have experienced developmental trauma. This one is for us. You need to get all four of them, you know. But the second one, I like that one. Developmental trauma. Third, mind restoration and life transformation. And then the fourth one is the seven. This one is it's related to what's happening now. Very appropriate. The fourth book is entitled Seven Brain Benefits of Biblical Meditation for Regulating Emotions During COVID-19. I believe, Doc, and tell me what you think. A lot of ladies, survivors of childhood sexual abuse, are really having a hard time in COVID-19. Away from family, away from friends, just trying to cope, or maybe in the same environment still with the perpetrator. So, really
Yes.
do this. Where can we find you? Facebook. I know you have a Facebook group.
There is a
Where can we
Facebook group,
find
the
you? Yes.
Healing Power of Biblical Meditation, Facebook. There's a website, Dr. Courtney Dookie at .ca, and people can email me at drcourtneydookie@gmail.com. So those are different ways you can get in touch with me. There's also a YouTube channel, which is Dr. Courtney Dookie.
Tell us about that YouTube channel. Nice.
Yes, there is a YouTube channel with a lot of videos that we've done. It's there and it's Dr. Courtney Dookie, the YouTube channel. So those are different ways you can connect with me. So at least there's four ways. So if others need us to share or anything, yeah, just let me know.
Yes,
Open.
please reach out to Doc, and I'm sure he'll be able to help you along your healing journey. Again, thank you so very much, Dr.
Thank you
Dookie.
for having me.
All yes, all the ladies, all the men who have joined us once again. Remember, we are here the first and third Wednesday of each month, right here. Please join us. If you want to get in contact with me as well, I can be emailed at womenhealingtogether@gmail.com. We also have some health products for women because this is all women. So if we talk about the brain, we talk about memory and all of that. We have some great health products as well. The link is in the description box below. You can check those out as well. And remember, we are women healing together because we heal so much better when we heal together. See you the first Wednesday in February. God bless.